Hello Year 9 and welcome to your first online lesson. Today we're going to be starting to look at our new topic, which is the Titanic. Now the Titanic module is going to be based mostly on the computer. It's going to be based on OneNote and it'll be around you doing your own research into the class systems, doing a data search and coming up with your own presentation on the Titanic and who was to blame for it sinking. And that'll be ultimately, it'll be an ORC assessment at the end that we do. However, before we do that, I do need to give you a little bit of background knowledge. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a little look about at what life was like in Britain around the time that the Titanic was being built. But before we start, I'd like you to put gwaith dosbarth or gwaith cartref, as it may be, in your books, and the date. And the register challenge today, or the starter challenge, I suppose, is a big question. And we're going to think about, is technology always a good thing? Now, you can do this a couple of ways. You can do it in a table. You can make a few bullet points. It's totally up to you, whatever works best. But I want you to think about good things about technology and bad things about technology. And I've given you a few pictures there to help you out. We've got on the one side there, the development of the very first light bulb and electricity. We've got vaccines, which, as we know, are very important into helping prevent illness. And we need a lot of technology to help us come up with vaccines, to help, well, the people that are in labs and the biologists invent vaccines. We've also got some things on the other side there. Football, Liverpool losing to Everton last week, supposedly because of the incompetence of the video analysis, the VAR. So think about that. And we've also got a more serious kind of problem there with things like the atomic bomb and explosives being developed. So there's some just ideas for you there to help you think about some good things and bad things about technology. You could be thinking about things like mobile phones and social media. You could be thinking about things like cars and aeroplanes and transport. Anything you can think about. Is it always good? Is it always bad? I'm going to suggest now that you pause the video to complete that task. And I will move on to the next slide. And when you're ready to move on and you've done that task, you can press the play button. Okay. So to really understand what life was like in Britain during the time of the building of the Titanic and when the Titanic set off, we do need to look at the British Empire. Now, the British Empire was the biggest at the time. It was the richest and most powerful country in the world. 400 million people nearly were under the control and the rule of Queen Victoria and Britain. That's 20% of the world's land. Okay, a fifth of the whole world is being run by this tiny little country that you can see here, that you could probably on that put your thumb over. This tiny little country there that my mouse even nearly covers was ruling Canada, Australia, India, Egypt, parts of Africa as well, all of these areas. Okay, Britain was trading with lots of countries. It was using resources from the countries, stealing resources, to be honest, from the countries that it was ruling and selling them on to other countries as well. So it was very, very rich, and it was the superpower, if you like, of the 1900s. Because the Industrial Revolution had really started in Britain, this meant that Britain was able to sort of get a step ahead and make lots and lots of money, trade with lots and lots of different countries. And so it was probably one of, if not the richest country in the world at this point as well. So what I want you to do to start with is, here is a map of the British Empire in 1912. I've attached a map to this lesson. What I'd like you to do, if you can print it off, that's brilliant. If not, please don't worry. I'd just like you to take the outline of the map and using Word or on your phone or on your tablet, however you can do it, just even if it's just a sort of little highlight, a little scribble over it, just highlight for me the areas of the world that you can see on this map that Britain ruled in 1912. Okay, again, I'm going to suggest that you pause the video here so that you can complete that task, and when you're done, press play again so I'll be moving on to the next piece of work. So the British people, there is a big difference between the rich and the poor during this time, and it's very, very obvious. It's becoming more obvious. Now I'm going to show you this video in a sec. It's a sketch video from the two Ronnies. It's very, very old, but it does give us a nice little idea of what the class system, even though it's a bit of a mick take, it's meant to be comedic, it does give us a good idea of what we mean by the class system during this time. So fingers crossed it works for us. There we go.
I look down on him because I am upper class. I look up to him because he is upper class. But I look down on him because he is lower class. I am middle class. I know my place. I look up to them both. But I don't look up to him as much as I look up to him. Because he has got innate breeding.
I have got innate breeding, but I have not got any money. So sometimes I look up to him.
I still look up to him. Because although I have money, I am vulgar. But I'm not as vulgar as him. So I still look down on him. I know my place.
Okay, so that's just a bit of an idea for you about the class system during this time. So if I just go back to my original, there we go. Now, what messages do you think this sketch is trying to get across? Have a little think about it now and maybe perhaps put some notes down. Have a think about what the message of this sketch is. What I find with it is it really does show you the difference between the upper classes and the lower classes, okay? The aristocrats at the top had innate breeding, as he says. They're very much thinking that they're better than anybody else. And then you've got your middle class, which are your doctors and your teachers and things like that. And then you've got your working class, lower class people who don't have much money, quite often are illiterate because they can't afford education, or they've got to leave education to go to work to help their parents, and the difference between the lives that they lead is huge, okay? Much bigger, some would say, than it is today, although there is a bit of a gap today. There is people would argue, but during this time it was blatantly obvious that a certain person was from a certain class. So your first class people, your aristocrats, your very, very rich people who'd inherited their money, and your lower working class people who didn't have anything and had to work 24 hours a day sometimes to actually make ends meet, okay? During this time as well, just quickly, you don't need to make any notes on this, it's just to give you a bit of background, but this is around the time that the suffragettes were protesting as well. So British society was moving forward with that as well, although the suffragettes faced a lot of backlash. It would be 1912 is when the Titanic set sail. It would be another 6 years before women actually got the vote. So the suffragettes were protesting during this time as well. So this is the kind of society that we're in. Women starting to have an awakening about the way they're being treated and wanting the vote and really this society that doesn't think that women deserve to get the vote. It's what you must understand is that Britain during this time is run by upper class men who sort of think that they're infallible, sort of think that they're better they're better and more equipped to run the country than anybody else, be it women or men from different classes, okay? Steamships are developing as well during the 19th century. They're faster, they're bigger, they're stronger. Obviously, previous to this as well, it was they'd sail and they'd have big sails and that, you know, your sort of your pirate ship kind of stereotypical image. But now they're faster, they're bigger, they're stronger. And the two shipping companies that are competing with each other are White Star Line, which is the company that built the Titanic, and Cunard. Okay, both of these companies are competing non-stop to try and build the bigger, better ship, okay, the more luxurious ship as well. White Star Line in particular are struggling a little bit to keep up with Cunard, and so Titanic was going to be their rising star, their absolute bread and butter. They were going to show Titanic off, and it was going to be the most luxurious ship in the world. So what I want you to do right now is, this is an exam question. This is the kind of question that would come up if you did History GCSE, and it would be the first question that you would answer on your paper. And it's use source A, which is this here, and your own knowledge to describe life in Britain in 1900. So let's have a quick read of it. With an empire that ruled over a quarter of the world's population, Britain in 1914 was an immensely powerful country. At home, British life was strictly stratified into a class system. The upper and middle class were brought up to believe that the lower classes were dirty and inferior, although they were prepared to employ them as servants. There were over 2 million servants in Britain at the turn of the century. That's 80% of the population. And that's from BBC Bright Key Stage 3 in 2008. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is highlight some words that you're not quite sure about. And again, I suggest that you pause the video while you do this. And what I want you to do is look up for me using the dictionary, using Google, what these words mean. So there's some quite difficult words there. I'm thinking stratified, immensely, that kind of thing. Anything you're not sure about, anything you don't understand, have a little look in your dictionary and get some terms for that. So you've got a better understanding of what this source is actually saying. Okay, so I would suggest you pause and do that now. Hopefully you've done that. And now we can have a little look at the question as well. So, an empire ruling over a quarter of the world's population, Britain being a hugely powerful country, but that's split into the class system, but saying basically that middle class people and upper class people believing that lower classes were inferior to them, that they were dirty, that they weren't as good as them. However, they were prepared to employ them as servants. Now, this will tell you something about the way that the wealth of the country lay. 80% of Britain at the turn of the century were servants. That was their job. They worked in the big houses. They worked in your Downton Abbeys, as servants, or they worked as servants to middle class. They were housekeepers. They perhaps were chauffeurs, butlers, all these kinds of things. A lot of the country were working as servants to the upper classes in 1912. Okay, and in 1900. So that comes from the BBC Bitesize website. It's quite a reputable website. It's known to helping pupils with exams, so it's quite reliable, and it was written in 2008. So, how do we answer a question like this? How would a GCSE marker expect you to answer this question? Well, basically, this will always be a source, not necessarily a picture, but it's more likely. So we're dealing with text today. 9 times out of 10, this question in an exam situation would be text. You'll be asked to use the source on your own knowledge, and you're expected to demonstrate an understanding of the key feature in the question. So let's go back a sec. The key feature in the question is life in Britain in 1900. We're going to try and describe what life was like in Britain in 1900 using everything that we've learned from this PowerPoint so far. You're expected to analyse the source in its historical context. Now, all that means is the context of when it was made. So we're looking at 2008, right? So in 2000, if it was made in 2008, it means it's made after the time, which is really important because it's probably going to be a historian who's helped to make it, which means he has what we call benefit of hindsight. He's been able to look back and gather loads of information. Okay, so that would make it quite reliable. So that's all we're going to think about. So you're going to say something like this source was written in 2008 after the events of it had happened, meaning that there's lots of time to research, lots of time to look at different interpretations and history books and things to help them write it. So you need 2 or 3 things from the source and two or three things really from your own knowledge. Okay, probably 3 or 4 actually from your own knowledge. So you're going to pick out 3 things, I'd say, from this source that tells you what life was like. You're going to say the source tells me that, and you're going to pick out 3 things. Okay, again, this source shows us, pick out 3 things, and then you're going to tell me 3 things from your own knowledge. Now, your own knowledge is going to be about things like steamships, perhaps the suffragettes, the class system, and the British Empire, things that we have learned and that you've heard me say throughout this PowerPoint. That's going to be your own knowledge, okay? So I want you to have a go at that now. One thing I will say before you have a go, actually, don't be too, this is a GCSE question. Obviously, you've never attempted anything like this before. It doesn't matter if you don't get 6 out of 6. I just want you to have a go at it. See what you can get out of it. Because I bet you, even just picking 3 things that this source says, that's going to get you 3 marks. Okay, so even just picking out and rewording 3 bits of information from this source is going to get you 3 out of 6. Okay, so that's something that you could do. So I want you to have a go now for me, please. Again, I suggest you pause the video, pause the PowerPoint, so that you can have a look, and you can obviously as well go backwards and you can have a look at this again. If I put this up, there we are, you can pause that there as well if you want to use that, and you can go back and forth then between this. The PowerPoint of this is also going to be attached to it, so you can actually download the PowerPoint yourselves and look through it as well to do it. So I'm going to suggest that you do that now. Hopefully you pause the video then and you're ready to move on. So what I want you to do now is have a little look at the mark scheme for this. So the mark scheme. Detailed understanding of the key feature in the question, or some understanding of the key feature of the question. So have you got a detailed understanding about life in Britain during 1900? Have you put in lots and lots of different information? That's what we're looking for there, okay? And then analysis of the source in its historical context. all that means is, have you put in things about it was written in 2008, which means it's after the time and it's got benefit of hindsight. If you've done that, you've got your marks there as well. So this one you can't see there, it's cut it off a little bit, but there's 4 marks for knowledge and there's 2 marks there. So this one is 1 and this one is 2 for the historical context. So again, if you've got a red pen, I'm going to ask you to self-assess it for me. So I'm going to say pause the video now. Hopefully you've self-assessed, you've given yourself a mark, and if you have attempted that, I have to say well done, that's brilliant. This is a GCSE question, so you're a year away from having a go at this yet. So if you've had a go, amazing, well done, I'm really pleased. That's all I wanted you to do, is just have a go. Okay, so what I want you to do now, just towards the end now, I just need to pull out any facts I want you to, and I'll have a look at this when you come back. Pause the video, bullet point any facts that you know about the Titanic. Before doing any research, don't use Google, don't use your phones, just anything that you know. If it's nothing, that's absolutely fine. That's why we're going to do this module. But I just want you to have a little look and think about any words, any bits of information that you know about the Titanic already. So again, pause the video now. Brilliant, hopefully you've done that. So why was the Titanic so special? Why are we so concerned with the Titanic? Well, at the time of her construction, Titanic was the largest passenger steamship of the world. Its maximum speed was 23 knots, 26 miles an hour. Not the fastest ship, but the most, still very, very fast, but the most luxurious. Now you can see, this is an Airbus A380, an aeroplane. That's where the aeroplane would fit on the Titanic. That is how big it was. It was huge, okay? Look at the size of the person compared to the rest of the ship. An absolutely massive, massive ship it was. So, its maiden voyage, its start voyage, she began her maiden voyage from Southampton, England, and was bound for New York, okay? We started in Southampton, and she was coming all across here to get to New York, okay? This is where the disaster happened. And the features of the Titanic, again, looking at why it was so special, it had a gym, it had Turkish baths, that grand staircase that was very luxurious. It was the first ship ever to have a swimming pool on it. It had lots and lots of cafes and restaurants as well. And we'll look later on in the lessons ahead at the different kinds of rooms that you could be in if you're in first, second or third class. But this really was the key features of it. This is why it was so impressive. It was supposed to be the most luxurious ship ever made. So, why was it such a famous ship, do you think? Pause the video there for me. Some bullet points why you think it was such a famous ship. Stop and pause. Okay, fingers crossed you've done that. Now, just to end the lesson, in your books, what I'd like you to do is draw around your hand for me, and I want you to write down 5 things on the thumb and each forefinger that you've learned throughout this PowerPoint for me, please, just to finish off. And once you've done that, we've finished the lesson. Well done. Thank you very much for listening. I shall see you next week.